The blood trail stretched behind Deacon Lawson like a scarlet ribbon on the dusty ground, marking his desperate journey across the unforgiving Arizona territory. His vision blurred as the blazing July sun of 1873 beat down mercilessly on his wounded body. 3 days on the run from Blackwell's gang had left him delirious, the bullet in his side slowly stealing his life away with each labored heartbeat. Just when darkness threatened to claim him, he spotted it in the distance, a small homestead with a wooden well standing sentinel in the yard. With the last of his strength, Deacon dragged himself toward salvation before collapsing beside the stone structure, his blood staining the sun-bleached wood as consciousness finally abandoned him. Bethany Rodgers wiped sweat from her brow as she stepped out of her modest cabin, bucket in hand. At 24, she'd grown accustomed to the solitude of her small ranch outside Bisbee, having inherited it after her father's passing 2 years prior. The Arizona heat shimmered across the landscape as she made her way to the well, her mind filled with the endless chores awaiting her. When she spotted the crumpled figure beside her well, Bethany froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. For a moment, she feared the worst bandits, perhaps, coming to claim what little she had. Drawing closer, she realized it was a man, motionless and bleeding. The stranger's face was streaked with dirt and blood, his clothes torn and filthy. Despite her initial fear, compassion overtook caution. Bethany dropped her bucket and knelt beside him, her fingers finding a faint pulse at his neck. "Mister, can you hear me?" she called, gently turning him to assess his wounds. Deacon's eyelids fluttered, revealing pain-glazed blue eyes that struggled to focus on her face. "Water," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Without hesitation, Bethany lowered the well bucket and drew up the cool water. She lifted his head carefully, bringing the ladle to his parched lips. "Small sips now," she instructed, her voice firm but kind. As the water trickled down his throat, Deacon felt a moment of clarity pierce through his fevered haze. The woman's face swam into focus, honey-brown hair escaping from a practical bun, concerned eyes the color of a stormy sky, and a determined set to her jaw. "Thank you," he whispered before unconsciousness claimed him once more. Bethany knew she couldn't leave him to die in the dirt. Though every instinct warned against bringing a stranger, especially a wounded one, into her home, she couldn't abandon him. With determination born from years of hard work, she managed to drag his considerable weight into her cabin, leaving a trail of blood across the threshold. Inside, she cut away his shirt to reveal the angry wound in his side. The bullet was still lodged there, festering. Her father had taught her basic medical skills, necessary knowledge for isolated ranch life, but this would test the limits of her abilities. Heating a knife over the fire until it glowed red, Bethany steeled herself for what needed to be done. "Forgive me, stranger," she murmured before pressing a leather strap between his teeth and beginning the grim work of extracting the bullet. Even unconscious, Deacon's body arched in agony, a strangled cry escaping despite the leather bit. Bethany worked with steady hands, her jaw clenched tight against her rising nausea. When the misshapen bullet finally came free, she cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with herbs, and bound it tightly with strips of clean linen. For 3 days, Deacon drifted between consciousness and delirium. Bethany kept vigil, cooling his fever with damp cloths and coaxing water and broth between his lips whenever possible. During his fevered ramblings, she pieced together fragments of his story, something about stolen gold, betrayal, and men named Blackwell and Carter. None of it made complete sense, but she gathered enough to know this man was running from something dangerous. On the 4th morning, Bethany awoke in her chair beside the bed to find Deacon watching her, his eyes clear and alert for the first time. "You saved my life," he stated simply, his voice rough from disuse. Bethany straightened, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance after days of nursing. "You collapsed at my well. I couldn't just let you die, there would have been a terrible inconvenience." The corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. "I appreciate your practical nature, Miss Rodgers, Bethany Rodgers, Deacon Lawson." He attempted to sit up but fell back with a grimace of pain. "Don't try to move yet, Mr. Lawson. That bullet nearly killed you." Bethany stood and poured a cup of water from the pitcher beside the bed. "You've been burning with fever for days." Deacon accepted the water gratefully. "How long have I been here?" 4 days now. You were more dead than alive when I found you." She took the empty cup from his hands. "Are you hungry? I've got stew warming." Before he could answer, a distant sound caught Bethany's attention, hoofbeats approaching. Her eyes met Deacon's, and she saw recognition followed by fear flash across his face. "They've found me," he whispered, attempting again to rise. "Miss Rodgers, you need to hide me or send me away. These men, they'll kill us both." Bethany moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. 3 riders were approaching, their postures suggesting confidence and purpose rather than caution. "Who are they?" "Blackwell's men. They think I have something that belongs to them." Deacon's voice was strained as he forced himself to sit upright. "Please, you've shown me kindness I can't repay. Don't let it cost you your life." Determination hardened Bethany's features as she made a swift decision. "Get back down," she ordered, pushing him gently but firmly onto the bed. "Pull the covers up to your chin and close your eyes." Moving quickly, she grabbed her father's shotgun from above the fireplace and placed it within reach beside the bed. Next, she disheveled her hair further, pinched color into her cheeks, and loosened her blouse slightly at the collar. "What are you doing?" Deacon asked, bewildered by her actions. "Saving both our skins, hopefully." Bethany glanced out the window again. The riders were almost at her gate. "If they ask, you're my husband down with swamp fever. It's catching and deadly. Most men won't risk coming near." Before Deacon could protest, she hurried outside to meet the visitors, closing the cabin door behind her. She stood on her porch, one hand on her hip, the other shielding her eyes from the sun as the 3 men reined in their horses. "Afternoon, gentlemen," she called, infusing her voice with a weariness that wasn't entirely feigned. "Something I can help you with." The leader, a hard-faced man with a scar crossing his left cheek, tipped his hat. "Afternoon, madam. Name's Carter. We're looking for a man who might have passed this way. Tall fellow, dark hair, probably wounded." Bethany shook her head. "Haven't seen anyone like that. Been too busy caring for my husband to notice much else. He's down with swamp fever, brought it back from a cattle drive to Louisiana." She lowered her voice conspirationally. "Doctor says it's catching. Already lost 2 farmhands to it last week." Carter's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but his companions shifted uneasily in their saddles. "Mind if we take a look around? Won't take but a minute." "Suit yourselves," Bethany replied with forced indifference. "But I wouldn't go in the cabin if I were you. Unless you fancy dying slow with your insides turning to liquid." She shuddered dramatically. "It ain't a pretty sight." The 3 men exchanged glances, their bravado visibly faltering. Carter cleared his throat. "Maybe we'll just check your barn and outbuildings. Go ahead. I'll be tending to my husband if you need anything." Bethany turned and walked back inside, praying her ruse would work. Inside, she found Deacon watching her with a mixture of amazement and concern. "They're checking the outbuildings," she whispered, "but I don't think they'll come in here." "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed," Deacon murmured. "Let's hope it was brave and not foolish," Bethany replied, taking up her position by the window to watch the men search her property. After what felt like an eternity, the riders remounted and approached the cabin once more. Bethany stepped outside, maintaining her weary, slightly disheveled appearance. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. Carter shook his head, clearly frustrated. "No, madam. If you do see the man we described, he's dangerous. Stole something valuable from my employer. There's a reward for information leading to his capture." "How much of a reward?" Bethany asked, allowing greed to color her voice. $500, Carter replied, studying her reaction. Bethany let out a low whistle. "That's a fair sum. I'll certainly keep an eye out, though, with my husband's condition." She trailed off with a helpless gesture. "Where's the next nearest homestead?" Carter asked. "Taylor Place is about 10 miles east. Then there's Bisbee, another 5 miles beyond that." Bethany pointed in the direction they should go. With reluctant nods, the men turned their horses and rode away. Bethany remained on the porch until they disappeared from sight before rushing back inside, her legs suddenly weak with relief. Deacon was sitting up, his face pale but determined. "You shouldn't have risked yourself for me." "I don't take kindly to men threatening to search my home," Bethany replied, setting the shotgun back in its place. "Besides, I've invested too much time keeping you alive to let them kill you now." Despite the gravity of the situation, Deacon found himself smiling. "I'm beginning to think you're not like most women, Miss Rodgers. Most women haven't had to run a ranch alone in the Arizona territory," she replied matter-of-factly. "Now, are you going to tell me why those men want you dead, or should I have let them take you?" Deacon's smile faded as he shifted uncomfortably. "It's a long story." "I've got time," Bethany said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "And you're not going anywhere for a while." With a resigned sigh, Deacon began his tale. He'd been working as a deputy marshal in Tucson when he uncovered evidence that the town's respected businessman, Edmund Blackwell, was actually running a sophisticated operation stealing Army payrolls and mining shipments. When Deacon gathered enough evidence to make an arrest, he discovered his own superior, Marshal Williams, was on Blackwell's payroll. "I was ambushed on my way to the territorial governor with the evidence," Deacon explained. "Williams himself put a bullet in me, but I managed to escape. I've been running ever since, trying to stay alive long enough to get the evidence to someone who can't be bought." "And where is this evidence now?" Bethany asked. Deacon hesitated before reaching beneath the bandages around his torso, wincing as he pulled out a small oilskin packet. "Here." Letters, account ledgers, witness statements, everything needed to bring down Blackwell's operation and expose everyone involved, including half the town council and the marshal. Bethany stared at the packet. "No wonder they want you dead. Now you understand why you should send me on my way. As long as I'm here, you're in danger. In case you haven't noticed, Mr. Lawson, you can barely stand, let alone ride." Bethany rose and moved to the stove to stir the forgotten stew. "Besides, they'll be watching the roads now. You need to heal before you go anywhere." "They'll come back," Deacon warned. "Probably," Bethany agreed. "But next time we'll be better prepared." Over the next 2 weeks, Deacon gradually regained his strength under Bethany's care. The wound in his side slowly knitted together, though it remained tender and limited his movement. During this time, they fell into a comfortable routine. Deacon insisted on helping with whatever tasks he could manage from inside the cabin, mending tack, cleaning tools, and even teaching Bethany to play checkers in the evenings. They shared stories by lamplight, Bethany of her childhood on the ranch with her father, learning to rope cattle and shoot straight. Deacon of his years riding with the Texas Rangers before becoming a deputy marshal. Despite the circumstances, they found moments of laughter and companionship that neither had experienced in a long time. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Deacon turned to study Bethany's profile. Why did you never marry?" He asked softly. "A woman like you, capable, intelligent, beautiful, surely you had suitors." Bethany's expression remained impassive, though a faint blush colored her cheeks. "There were a few interested men over the years. None who understood that this ranch is part of who I am, not just something to be tolerated or taken over." She glanced at him. "What about you? No wife waiting somewhere worrying?" "No," Deacon replied, his gaze returning to the horizon. "The life of a lawman doesn't lend itself to permanence. I told myself there would be time for that later, after I'd done some good in the world." A rueful smile touched his lips. "Now I'm not sure I'll live long enough to find out." "Don't talk like that," Bethany admonished. "You're getting stronger every day." "Strong enough to leave soon," Deacon observed. "I need to get this evidence to the territorial capital before Blackwell can expand his operation further or disappear with his fortunes." The thought of Deacon leaving sent an unexpected pang through Bethany's chest. In the short time he'd been with her, his presence had filled a loneliness she hadn't fully acknowledged before. The cabin felt warmer somehow, the endless work less daunting with someone to share stories and meals with at day's end. "Where will you go after?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "Assuming the governor acts on your evidence and Blackwell is brought to justice." Deacon was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't thought that far ahead. My badge won't mean much after exposing corruption in our ranks. Might be time to try something new." He looked at her directly. "What would you say to a ranch hand? I'm handy with horses, decent with cattle, and I make a fair pot of coffee." Before Bethany could respond, the distant sound of approaching riders shattered the peaceful evening. They both tensed, exchanging alarmed glances. "Get inside," Deacon said, rising stiffly to his feet. "Could be innocent travelers, but I doubt it." They retreated into the cabin, Bethany retrieving her shotgun while Deacon checked the loading of his revolver, which she had cleaned and kept ready for him. Peering cautiously through the window, they counted 5 riders approaching more than before, and moving with deliberate speed. "It's Carter," Deacon confirmed grimly. "And it looks like he brought Blackwell himself this time." He pointed to a distinguished-looking older man riding a magnificent black stallion. "They're not falling for the swamp fever story again," Bethany stated, her mind racing. "We need a different plan." Deacon reached a decision. "There's no time for you to escape. I'll go out and face them, draw them away from the cabin. Once they're gone, you ride for Bisbee and find Deputy Cooper. He was never on Blackwell's payroll as far as I know. Give him the evidence." "That's suicide," Bethany protested. "There are 5 of them and one of you, and you're still healing." "Better than both of us dying here," Deacon replied, his expression resolute. "I won't have your blood on my hands, Bethany." The use of her first name made her heart stutter, but she steeled herself against the emotion. "And I won't watch you sacrifice yourself needlessly." She moved to the back wall and pulled away a small rug, revealing a trapdoor. "Root cellar. My father built it big enough to store supplies for winter and to hide in if Apache raiders came. They won't find you here." Deacon shook his head. "I'm not hiding while you face them alone." "You're not," Bethany countered, already gathering the oilskin packet of evidence. "You're protecting the evidence that can bring these men to justice. I'm just going to stall them." She thrust the packet into his hands. "Now get down there and be quiet, no matter what you hear." The riders were almost at the gate. With no time to argue further, Deacon reluctantly descended into the cramped cellar. 10 minutes, he warned. "If they're not gone in 10 minutes, I'm coming out, evidence be damned." Bethany nodded and closed the trapdoor, replacing the rug just as a commanding knock sounded at the door. Taking a deep breath, she set her shotgun aside, visible but not in hand, and opened the door with a confused expression. "Evening, gentlemen. Something I can help you with?" Edmund Blackwell himself stepped forward, his silver hair and tailored clothing marking him as a man of wealth and influence. His cold eyes surveyed her with calculating precision. "Miss Rodgers, I presume? I am Edmund Blackwell, a businessman from Tucson. I believe my associates visited you recently regarding a fugitive." "Yes, sir. I remember," Bethany replied, keeping her voice steady. "I told them I haven't seen anyone matching that description." "Indeed." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "However, we've received information suggesting otherwise. A traveler reported seeing a wounded man being dragged into this very cabin some weeks ago. Curious that you failed to mention this." Bethany's mind raced. Someone must have seen her helping Deacon that first day. "That would have been my cousin Daniel," she improvised. "Threw himself from a horse and broke his collarbone. He recovered and left for California last week." Carter stepped forward, his hand resting suggestively on his holstered pistol. "Mind if we come in and look around, just to be thorough?" Bethany hesitated, knowing refusal would only confirm their suspicions. "I suppose that would be all right, though I don't appreciate strangers invading my home." She stepped aside, heart pounding as the men entered. Blackwell remained near the door while Carter and two others began searching the cabin, overturning furniture and opening cabinets with little regard for her possessions. The fourth man remained outside, watching the perimeter. "You're making quite a mess of my home, Mr. Blackwell," Bethany observed, struggling to maintain her composure as they neared the area concealing the trapdoor. "My apologies for the inconvenience," Blackwell replied without sincerity. "We're looking for a dangerous man, a thief, and a murderer. Surely you understand the importance of bringing such a person to justice." One of the men kicked aside the rug covering the trapdoor, revealing the wooden outline. "Boss, look here." Bethany's blood ran cold as Carter moved to investigate, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Well, well. What's this, Miss Rodgers? A hidden compartment in your floor?" "It's just a root cellar," she replied, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "For storing preserves and potatoes." "Open it," Blackwell ordered. Before anyone could move, the sound of galloping hooves and shouting erupted outside. The man who had been keeping watch burst through the door. "Riders coming. At least a dozen, looks like the cavalry." Confusion and alarm rippled through the room. Blackwell moved swiftly to the window, his expression darkening as he confirmed the approaching force. "Carter, we need to leave. Now." "But boss, the cellar, no time," Blackwell snapped. "If that's the cavalry, we can't be found here. We'll return after they've gone." The men hesitated only briefly before following their leader outside. Bethany stood frozen in disbelief as they mounted their horses and rode away at speed, taking a route that would avoid encountering the approaching riders. When they were out of sight, Deacon emerged from the cellar, his expression mirroring her confusion. "What in blazes is going on?" "Did you hear what they said about cavalry?" "I have no idea," Bethany admitted, moving to the window to observe the approaching riders. As they drew closer, her confusion only deepened. "That's not the cavalry, that's my neighbors." Indeed, riding into her yard was a collection of nearby ranchers and farmers, led by the burly figure of Douglas Taylor from the neighboring property. At least 15 men in all, some carrying rifles, others brandishing tools that could serve as weapons. Bethany hurried outside, Deacon following more cautiously behind her. "Mr. Taylor, what brings you all here?" Douglas Taylor dismounted, his weathered face breaking into a relieved smile. "Miss Rodgers, you're all right. When young Billy said he saw men riding toward your place, men matching the description of those who have been terrorizing homesteads between here and Tucson, we gathered everyone we could find." His eyes narrowed as he noticed Deacon. "Who's this?" Before Bethany could answer, Deacon stepped forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "Deacon Lawson, Deputy U.S. Marshal, those men you just scared off are part of a criminal organization I've been investigating." Taylor's eyebrows shot up. "Marshal, eh? You don't look in any condition to be chasing criminals." "He was wounded trying to bring them to justice," Bethany explained. "I've been helping him recover." Over the next hour, as the neighbors established a protective watch around the property, Deacon explained the situation to Taylor and the other men. Most had heard rumors of payroll robberies and missing shipments, but hadn't connected them to Blackwell, whose reputation in the territory was carefully cultivated. "So this fancy businessman is behind all the trouble?" asked Jenkins, a grizzled miner from up the canyon. "Been wondering why the stage keeps getting hit between here and Prescott." "And you've got proof?" Taylor questioned, eyeing the oilskin packet Deacon now held. "Enough to put Blackwell and his associates away for a long time," Deacon confirmed. "But I need to get it to the territorial governor in Prescott." The men exchanged glances before Taylor spoke again. "Well, Marshal, seems to me you've got yourself an escort. These men stole from half the folks here in one way or another. We've got a vested interest in seeing them brought to justice." Deacon looked at the determined faces surrounding him, honest working men pushed to their limit by the corruption and violence Blackwell had brought to their region. "I appreciate the offer, but this could be dangerous." "Blackwell won't give up easily." "Neither will we," Taylor replied firmly. "We'll leave at first light, safety in numbers." As the men dispersed to make preparations for the journey and set up a night watch around the property, Bethany pulled Deacon aside. The relief on her face had given way to concern. "You're not strong enough for this ride," she said quietly. "The wound could reopen." "I don't have a choice," Deacon replied. "This may be my only chance to get the evidence through safely." Bethany's jaw set in a stubborn line he was coming to recognize. "Then I'm going with you." "Absolutely not," he objected immediately. "It's too dangerous. More dangerous than staying here alone when Blackwell realizes he's been deceived," she countered. "Besides, who's going to change your bandages when you start bleeding again?" Their argument was interrupted by Taylor, who approached with a knowing look. "Miss Rodgers, I took the liberty of asking Mrs. Jenkins to pack some supplies for you. Figured you'd be joining us." Deacon opened his mouth to protest again, but Bethany's triumphant expression stopped him. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor," she said. "That was very thoughtful." As Taylor walked away, Deacon shook his head in resignation. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Fortunate for you," Bethany replied with a small smile. "Or you'd be dead by now." That night, with neighbors standing guard around her property, Bethany packed provisions for the journey while Deacon rested. The ride to Prescott would take several days, even pushing hard, and his strength would be tested. Despite the danger ahead, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. This journey would determine not only Blackwell's fate, but perhaps her own future as well. Dawn broke clear and cool across the desert, casting long shadows as the party prepared to depart. 17 riders in all, Deacon, Bethany, and 15 local men determined to see justice done. Bethany had dressed practically in split riding skirts, a sturdy blouse, and a wide-brimmed hat, her shotgun secured in a saddle holster. Deacon, though pale, sat straight in his saddle, his marshal's badge pinned to his vest, a symbol of the authority he still represented, despite his superior's betrayal. "Stay in the middle of the group," he instructed Bethany as they mounted. "If there's trouble, find cover and stay down." "I can shoot better than half the men here," she reminded him. "That doesn't mean you should have to," Deacon replied softly. They rode northwest, taking a route that avoided the main roads where Blackwell's men might be watching. The journey was arduous, the terrain alternating between rocky passes and open desert. Bethany kept a close eye on Deacon, noting the tightness around his eyes that betrayed his pain, though he never complained. By midday, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising the sudden violent storms common to the territory in summer. Taylor rode up alongside them, gesturing toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. San Pedro Trading Post, he explained. Run by the Reynolds family, good folks. We can shelter there until the storm passes. The trading post consisted of a general store with attached living quarters, a small stable, and a couple of outbuildings. The Reynolds, an older couple with their adult son, welcomed the group warmly, offering shelter and hot coffee as the first raindrops began to fall. Inside the crowded store, Bethany helped Deacon to a chair in the corner, away from curious eyes. "Let me check your bandages," she insisted quietly. Despite his protests about impropriety, she carefully opened his shirt to examine the wound. A small amount of fresh blood stained the bandage, but the stitches were holding. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she murmured as she applied a fresh dressing. "We need to reach Prescott before Blackwell figures out where we're headed," Deacon replied, wincing as she tightened the bandage. "He has men all over the territory." "You won't help anyone if you bleed to death on the trail," Bethany countered. Their quiet argument was interrupted by young Reynolds rushing into the store, his expression urgent. "Riders coming. 6 men, heavily armed. Don't look friendly." Taylor immediately took charge, positioning the men at windows and doorways. "Could be coincidence," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Deacon struggled to his feet. "Not likely. Blackwell must have men watching all the routes to Prescott." He turned to Bethany. "I need the evidence packet." She handed it to him reluctantly, watching as he approached Reynolds. "Is there a back way out of here?" Reynolds nodded. "Trail behind the stable leads up to the ridge, rough going but passable." "I need someone to take this to Governor Safford in Prescott," Deacon explained, holding up the packet. "If those are Blackwell's men, they're after me and this evidence. We need to ensure it gets through even if they take us." Young Reynolds stepped forward. "I know these mountains better than anyone. I can get through." Deacon hesitated only briefly before handing him the packet. "Tell the governor it comes from Deputy Marshal Deacon Lawson. Everything he needs to know is inside." As Reynolds slipped out the back, the approaching riders drew up in front of the trading post. Through the rain-streaked windows, Bethany could see Carter among them, his scarred face twisted in a triumphant smile as he dismounted. "We know you're in there, Lawson," he shouted above the rain. "Come out and maybe the rest of these folks don't have to die today," Taylor spat on the floor. 6 against 16, I like those odds." "They don't know our numbers," Deacon pointed out. "We can use that to our advantage." The next few minutes were a blur of activity as they prepared for the confrontation. The older Reynolds led several men to positions around the property, while Taylor organized the defense of the main building. Deacon, despite Bethany's objections, insisted on taking a position by the front window. "I've been hunting these men for months," he told her firmly. "I won't hide while others fight my battles." Carter's patience was wearing thin outside. "Last chance, Lawson, or we burn this place to the ground with everyone inside." Deacon exchanged glances with Taylor, who nodded grimly. "On my signal," Taylor murmured to the men positioned around the room. What happened next unfolded with the chaotic intensity of a summer storm. As Carter and his men moved toward the building, Taylor gave the signal. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, taking Carter's group by surprise. 2 of his men fell immediately, while the others scattered for cover. The trading post became the center of a fierce gun battle that raged through the downpour. Bullets splintered wood and shattered glass as both sides exchanged fire. Bethany, despite Deacon's earlier instructions, found herself beside him, reloading his revolver as he fired with grim precision. "You should be under cover," he growled between shots. "And leave you to bleed out when those stitches tear," she retorted. "Not likely." The tide turned when several of Taylor's men, who had circled behind the attackers, opened fire from the rear. Caught in a crossfire, Carter's remaining men were quickly subdued. Carter himself made a desperate break for the horses, but Deacon's bullet found his leg, sending him crashing to the mud. When the gunfire finally ceased, 3 of Carter's men lay dead, 2 were wounded, and Carter himself sat slumped against a hitching post, clutching his bleeding thigh and glaring hatred at Deacon as he emerged from the trading post. "It's over, Carter," Deacon said, keeping his revolver trained on the man. "Where's Blackwell?" Carter spat blood. "Go to hell, Lawson." "He's probably halfway to Mexico by now," Deacon guessed. "But we've got his ledgers, his correspondence, and now we've got you. One way or another, his operation is finished." While Taylor's men secured the prisoners, Bethany checked the defenders. Miraculously, none had been killed, though 3 had sustained minor wounds. Deacon himself was pale and unsteady, his bandages now soaked with fresh blood from the exertion. "Sit down before you fall down," Bethany ordered, guiding him to a chair. As she tended to his reopened wound, young Reynolds returned, breathless but triumphant. "Met a cavalry patrol on the ridge," he reported. "Lieutenant Walsh and 20 men. They're on their way down now." Sure enough, within the hour, blue-uniformed cavalry soldiers arrived at the trading post. Lieutenant Walsh, a crisp, efficient young officer, quickly took charge of the prisoners and listened with growing interest to Deacon's account of Blackwell's operations. "We've been after these payroll thieves for months," Walsh confirmed. "Had no idea Blackwell was behind it all. The Army will be very interested in this evidence, Marshal." "It needs to go to the territorial governor," Deacon insisted. "This goes beyond Army payrolls. There's corruption in the Marshal's office itself." Walsh nodded his understanding. "We'll escort you to Prescott ourselves. These men have killed soldiers. The Army has a vested interest in seeing them brought to justice." With the cavalry's arrival, the immediate danger had passed. The storm cleared as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving a fresh, washed landscape under a brilliant blue sky. The injured were tended to, the dead buried, and preparations made for the journey to Prescott the following morning. That evening, Bethany found Deacon sitting on the trading post's porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and purple. She settled beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "The lieutenant says we can reach Prescott in 2 days with their escort," she said. Deacon nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And then it's over. My testimony, the evidence, it should be enough to bring down Blackwell and everyone connected to him." "What will you do afterward?" Bethany asked, the question that had been hovering between them for days. Deacon turned to look at her directly. "That depends on whether a certain stubborn rancher still needs a hand with her cattle." Bethany's heart quickened. "The position remains open," she replied carefully. "Though I should warn you, the owner is demanding. Expects a full day's work for a day's pay." "I've heard she's worth the effort," Deacon said softly, his hand finding hers on the weathered porch boards. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. The danger wasn't completely past. Blackwell remained at large, but for the first time in weeks, the future held more promise than peril. The journey to Prescott proceeded without incident, the cavalry escort deterring any remaining members of Blackwell's gang who might have considered an ambush. Deacon's strength improved with each passing day, though Bethany remained vigilantly at his side, changing bandages and insisting he rest when needed. They arrived in the territorial capital on a bustling afternoon, the streets filled with the commerce and activity of a growing frontier city. Lieutenant Walsh escorted Deacon directly to the governor's office, while Bethany waited anxiously outside, aware that his testimony would shape not only Blackwell's fate, but the future of law enforcement throughout the territory. 2 hours later, Deacon emerged from the governor's office, exhaustion evident in his face but satisfaction in his eyes. "It's done," he told her as they walked slowly down the street. "Governor Safford is sending telegrams to Tucson and all county seats. Arrest warrants are being issued for Blackwell, Marshal Williams, and a dozen others. Army patrols are being dispatched to watch the borders in case Blackwell tries to flee to Mexico." "You did it," Bethany said, pride warming her voice. "After all this, justice will be served." "We did it," Deacon corrected. "I'd have died at your well if not for you." The governor insisted they remain in Prescott until Blackwell was apprehended, arranging accommodations for them at the Palace Hotel, separate rooms, of course, with Bethany's reputation carefully preserved. For 3 days, they explored the city together, Deacon gradually regaining his strength as they wandered through shops and watched the territory's government at work. On the 4th morning, news arrived via telegraph. Edmund Blackwell had been captured trying to cross into Mexico. The evidence provided by Deacon had already led to the arrest of Marshal Williams and several town officials in Tucson. The conspiracy was unraveling rapidly, exposing corruption that reached further than even Deacon had suspected. Governor Safford summoned Deacon that afternoon, offering him a position as special investigator for the territorial government, tasked with rooting out remaining corruption in local law enforcement. "It's an important position," Deacon explained to Bethany as they dined that evening in the hotel restaurant. "Good pay, respect, a chance to finish what I started." Bethany studied his expression carefully. "Is that what you want?" Deacon was silent for a long moment, turning his wine glass slowly between his fingers. "A month ago, I would have accepted without hesitation. It's the kind of position I've worked toward my entire career." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Now I find my priorities have changed." "Because of a bullet wound?" Bethany asked softly. "Because of the woman who healed it," he replied. "I told the governor I needed time to consider his offer." The following morning, they began the journey back to Bisbee, accompanied by a small cavalry escort as a precaution, though the threat from Blackwell's organization had largely dissolved. As they traveled, the rhythm of the trail created a space for contemplation and conversation, unlike the urgent discussions of their previous journey. "My father always said the land chooses its people, not the other way around," Bethany reflected as they rode side by side, the escort maintaining a respectful distance ahead and behind. When he first came to Arizona, he only meant to stay long enough to earn money for a better place. 25 years later, he died on the same land he claimed as a young man. "Do you believe that?" Deacon asked. "That the land chooses?" Bethany considered the question seriously. "I believe we find the places that reflect something inside us. For my father, it was the challenge, the untamed quality that matched his spirit. For me," she gestured at the sweeping desert landscape around them, "there's an honesty to this land. It doesn't pretend to be easy or forgiving, but it rewards those who understand its nature." "And what about people?" Deacon pressed. "Do they choose each other, or is that fate as well?" Their eyes met, the question hanging in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond the philosophical. "I think," Bethany said carefully, "that sometimes people recognize something in each other, the same way they might recognize something in a landscape. a reflection of something they need or want or already have inside themselves. Deacon nodded thoughtfully. When I collapsed at your well, I was looking for water to save my life. I found that and more. The remainder of the journey passed in comfortable conversation interspersed with companionable silence. By the time they reached Bethany's ranch, a decision had crystallized in Deacon's mind. The cavalry escort departed after ensuring the property was secure, leaving them alone for the first time in days. Standing on the porch of her cabin in the golden light of late afternoon, Bethany felt a curious mixture of homecoming comfort and nervous anticipation. "It seems smaller somehow," she observed, looking around the familiar yard. "After everything that's happened." "The world gets bigger once you've seen more of it," Deacon replied, setting down their bags. "Makes coming home all the more important." The word home hung in the air between them, its meaning uncertain yet hopeful. That evening, after they had settled back into the cabin, Deacon joined Bethany on the porch as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. He held something in his hand, a folded paper that he turned repeatedly between his fingers. "I received this before we left Prescott," he said finally, holding it out to her. "My official commendation from the governor, along with the offer of the investigator position. Full details, salary, duties." Bethany took the paper but didn't open it. "Have you made your decision?" "I have." Deacon took a deep breath. "I'm going to decline." Surprise flickered across Bethany's face. "But this is what you've worked for, a chance to make a real difference." "There are different ways to make a difference," Deacon replied. "The governor also mentioned that the marshal position in Bisbee will soon be vacant. It's a smaller job, less prestigious, but closer to home," Bethany suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. Deacon nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "If home is where I hope it might be." In the silence that followed, Bethany felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of weeks of shared danger, mutual reliance, and growing affection that had transformed into something deeper neither had fully acknowledged until now. "When I found you at my well," she said at last, "I thought I was saving a stranger's life. I didn't expect that stranger to save something in me I didn't know needed saving." "What was that?" Deacon asked softly. "The part that believed I was better off alone." Bethany's voice wavered slightly. "The part that thought independence meant never needing anyone." Deacon moved closer, taking her hand in his. "Bethany Rodgers, I came to your well dying of thirst, but your water quenched more than just that. You gave me back my faith in justice, in people, in possibilities I'd stopped believing in." "Like what?" she asked, her heart racing at his proximity. "Like the possibility of finding home in a person as much as in a place." His free hand gently touched her cheek. "I know it's soon we've known each other under extraordinary circumstances, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Bethany." The words, simple and direct like the man himself, filled the space between them with possibility. Bethany felt tears spring to her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. "I thought I was content with my life," she whispered, "until you showed me how much more it could contain." When their lips finally met, it felt like the natural conclusion to a story that had begun with blood and desperation at a desert well. The kiss deepened, tender yet insistent, expressing months of emotion compressed into weeks of shared danger and quiet moments. "I love you too," Bethany said when they finally parted. "And yes, this ranch could use a marshal for a neighbor, especially one who makes decent coffee." Deacon laughed, the sound rich and unburdened in a way she hadn't heard before. "I think the marshal might prefer to be more than just a neighbor, if the lady of the ranch is amenable." "The lady might be persuaded," Bethany replied with a smile. Under the vast Arizona sky, filled with more stars than either had ever taken time to notice before. They made plans for a future neither had imagined when fate or chance or providence had brought a wounded lawman to a lonely woman's well. In the months that followed, their lives underwent a transformation as natural and gradual as the changing seasons. Deacon accepted the position as Marshal of Bisbee, quickly earning the respect of the townspeople with his fair-minded approach to law enforcement and his key role in bringing down Blackwell's organization. The trials made headlines across the territory, with Deacon's testimony sending Blackwell, Williams, and their associates to prison for terms that would ensure none ever threatened the territory again. Bethany continued running her ranch, though now with Deacon's help in the evenings and on his days off. Together, they expanded the operation, adding more cattle and improving the irrigation system to support a larger vegetable garden. The cabin gradually transformed as well. Deacon built a larger porch where they could sit in the evenings, and room by room, his possessions integrated with hers until the distinction between his and hers faded into theirs. On a perfect spring day in 1874, less than a year after Deacon had collapsed at her well, they were married in Bisbee's small church. Taylor gave the bride away, and many of the men who had ridden with them to Prescott attended, along with what seemed like half the town. Governor Safford himself sent a silver serving set as a wedding gift, along with a personal letter commending their courage and service to the territory. After the ceremony, they hosted a celebration at the ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and lanterns hanging from the branches as dusk fell. When the last guests had departed, they stood together on the porch of what was now truly their home. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" Deacon asked, his arms encircling her waist from behind as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "More than I ever thought possible," Bethany replied, leaning back against his chest, "though I'm still getting used to the name." "You could always keep Rodgers for the ranch," he suggested. "Rodgers Ranch has a good sound to it." Bethany turned in his arms to face him. "No, Lawson Ranch sounds right to me. Besides, soon enough there might be little Lawsons running around. They should know their name is on the land." Deacon's eyes widened. "Are you saying—" "Not yet," Bethany laughed at his expression. "But someday, perhaps someday soon." Their someday came the following spring, when their son Daniel was born, a healthy, robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined expression from the very start. 2 years later, he was joined by a sister, Elizabeth, whose arrival coincided with the completion of a new, larger ranch house that Deacon had built adjacent to the original cabin. As the years passed, the Lawson family and their ranch prospered. Deacon continued serving as marshal until 1880, when he retired to focus entirely on the ranch and their growing family. By then, the Arizona Territory was changing rapidly. The railroad had arrived, bringing new settlers, new opportunities, and new challenges. Through it all, Deacon and Bethany remained constants in the community, respected figures whose story of courage and justice had become something of a local legend. Sometimes, visitors to the ranch would ask about the old well preserved and maintained even after a more modern water system was installed. Bethany would smile and say simply, "That well saved my husband's life once, and in saving him, it gave me mine." On warm evenings, long after the children were grown with families of their own, Deacon and Bethany could still be found sitting together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in colors no artist could capture. Their hands would find each other, fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of decades together. "Do you ever wonder," Bethany asked on one such evening, silver now threading through her honey-brown hair, lines of laughter and experience marking her still beautiful face. What would have happened if you hadn't found my well that day? Deacon, his own hair gone mostly gray but his blue eyes still sharp and clear, considered the question. I'd have died, most likely, or Blackwell would have won. And I'd still be alone, Bethany mused, thinking I preferred it that way. The land chooses its people, Deacon reminded her, quoting her father's wisdom from long ago. And sometimes, people find exactly what they need, exactly when they need it most. Even if it begins with a bullet wound and a desperate thirst, Bethany asked, smiling. Especially then, Deacon replied, raising her hand to his lips. Because your water quenched more than my thirst that day. It began everything that mattered. As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, they sat in companionable silence, two lives inextricably woven together by fate choice, and a love that had begun at a desert well, where a wounded cowboy had found not only water for his parched throat, but healing for his wounded soul in the arms of a woman who discovered that independence and love could exist side by side, strengthening rather than diminishing each other. The Lawson Ranch remained a landmark in the region for generations, and long after Deacon and Bethany were gone, their descendants maintained the old well, marked with a simple plaque that read, "Here began a love that water quenched but never extinguished." Deacon and Bethany Lawson, united in life and legacy, 1873.